Hello, I'm Tina Sauser, and this is Chapter 7, Assignment 7, in regards to communication. And the communication I chose was the latest communication or big communication I had with a school of ours who has just decided to guide their teachers towards Google for Education. They've been wanting to do this for a while, but they've chose this year to move forward with that. So their domain has just gotten set up. So to develop the idea, I met with their new technology coordinator and the administrator to find out what their expectations were for the beginning of utilizing this platform. Teachers had, according to the administrator and the tech coordinator, the teachers had limited experience using the Google accounts. However, the students had been using their accounts prior. Then each student, 7 through 12, has HP streams. So the teachers were given an email account from ESU 8, which is an Office 365 account, and then they were also then issued a Google account. And so it was decided that the first thing that we needed to do was to combine the two emails so they were functioning just from one email. And so the administrator had stated that when they were given their ESU 8 Office 365 accounts, that they had allowed teachers to forward those accounts to their personal emails, whatever that was. And after some discussion and encouragement from me, it was decided that that was probably not the best practice. And so our first steps of moving into the Google Education platform was to get teachers to combine their email addresses, just their professional email addresses, and then we would move forward from there by having conversations with teachers to see what they needed. And so after we introduced the emails, then again, we would decide between the administrator and myself, we would decide upon the next steps and where we wanted to move. So one of the decisions, how we decided to do the email was because there had to be very individualized, we decided that we would give the teachers the option of whether they wanted to use their school-issued Google accounts or their school-issued Office 365 accounts, and then we would take the other one and forward it to that email so that they were only managing one. So the decision was made to combine their emails and separate separate the personal email from the professional email. So I sat down and reviewed my notes after leaving the conversation with the administrator and the tech coordinator. And I wrote up a plan to meet with each teacher individually to organize the email the way that they felt would work best for them. And I walked through each step after I had decided on how this was going to work to make sure that I understood how it would work both directions, both forwarding to the Office account or forwarding to the Google account. And I decided that I would ask each teacher first which type of email they preferred, and then we would move forward from there. The transmit of the information would have only worked face-to-face and individually because each teacher could have chosen a different path. So I spent a day and a half at the district. I was assigned to one central location so the teachers could come to me during their break times or when they had time. I was also scheduled a half hour before school started and a half hour after school was over so that I could be available for teachers then as well. It worked perfectly for the staff to have that day and a half because then they got to choose. They had to meet with me no matter what, but they got to choose what day it would work best for them. And because each teacher was at a different level of understanding, it gave me the chance to communicate with each one at their level, working with them independently. I was able to depict just simply by body language which teacher was more comfortable and which teachers weren't so comfortable with the email and the email change. The one staff member in particular I chose to discuss is one that was not very comfortable with the technology, and she mentioned to me that she would need a lot of help before she even sat down. So I first began by asking her if she was comfortable with Office Mail or with Gmail system, and she stated that her personal email was a Google account, so that she would like to have her work email transferred from Office to Google so that she could work in the same platform. I explained she had originally had it set up so that she had her Office email forward to her personal Gmail account, and so we talked about why that was not the best practice, and why it was important to keep a personal and professional email separate. She nodded her head in agreement and stated that she had concerns about doing it in the first place, but it was the only way that she felt she could make it work. So I actually, because of her level of understanding, took control of the computer, and as I walked through each step, I explained to her what I was doing, but I did tell her that it wasn't anything that she had to remember, because she wouldn't have to do these steps again, but I did want her to know what I was doing while I was doing it. So I explained to her that after we forward her Office email to her school-issued Google account, I explained to her that the only email that she ever had to check was her school Google account, and anything that was sent to her Office account would be directly forwarded to her Google account. And she seemed to understand that, so she was very comfortable with using her Google account, and so she was listening to me pretty intently, and was comfortable with what I was stating. But to make sure that she was decoding the information and understanding what I was asking her to do, I logged out of everything on the computer and passed her the computer and asked her to log in as if she was going to get her email or open her email. And I asked her if she could do it by herself. And she was quickly able to do so with very little help. I then asked if she had any questions about what we had done, or if there was anything I could help her with in relation to her email, even if she just had any basic questions on email. And she asked me how to get her earlier emails transferred over, because once you transfer an email account, all the earlier ones stay in that Office account for her. And so she was wondering how to get the ones that she needed from her Office account into the Google, so they were all in one place. So I showed her how to forward a few of them, and then I let her practice on that herself. And she did very well. The communication worked really well, and I felt like she was understanding and she had a grasp on what I was trying to communicate to her. So I do plan on following up with the teachers at the school to make sure they have they're comfortable with their emails, and if they have any questions for me. And I hope to be able to move their understanding of just the simple use of Gmail into or their email into the use of technology with their students. And so I have taken my communication back to the administrator and the tech coordinator in reaching out to find out what they want to do for the next steps now that we have the email taken care of. The nonverbal behavior communication of teachers, I chose our last department coordinators meeting, which happened yesterday. This was a group of people including our administrator, assistant administrator, professional development coordinators, technology coordinators, our special education coordinators, nursing coordinators, and land manager. The meeting lasted for about 2 hours with multiple topics to be covered. Each person in the room was in front of their laptops for the majority of the meeting time. Each person, in observance of their body movements during certain conversations, there was resembled body language that resembled excitement, and at the same time there were some that resembled contempt. The ones who were excited were leaning forward towards the speaker with their laptops down at half mast. The ones that were resembling contempt were leaning back in their chairs with their arms crossed, but were still intent on listening. There was a couple that were disengaged completely, who were, I assume, reading emails on their laptops. I think the setup for our meeting was ideal because of the bigger group of people that we had. We were actually sitting in a horseshoe shape where everybody could see everybody's face and could see and hear the speaker well. The topic of proximity actually came up in our meeting because we were talking about the lack of communication within our departments, and it was discovered, how far apart each one of us are, even people on the same teams, and so the communication wasn't always timely or as effective as it could be. It was interesting to see the dynamics of this meeting because there were disputes, but they were constructive and no one left angry. The conversations were accepted by all as collaborative thinking. There were points that were for instance, when a discussion took place, there were differing opinions and the volume rose, but the posture of those people changed. But once the issue was decided upon, everyone went back to being intent on listening, and we moved on to the next topic. As far as time, everything started on time. The meeting started on time. There were people who had to step out occasionally, and that was truly accepted. Nobody was angry by this or thrown off by this. And there was a time frame set for each topic, but everything was covered in full detail because we only get together once a month. I did overhear people at the end discussing that this was one of the longest of these types of meetings that we've had, so I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but it was definitely a long meeting, and then we had to follow up with another meeting, so we basically were in meetings all day, which was okay, but the nonverbal communication was interesting to watch as we went throughout a 2-hour meeting, and for the most part, I was impressed at how intent on listening everyone was. Like I said, there was a few that were disengaged, but it seemed they were disengaged only at the times that really didn't relate to them anyway.